Hello, Jeff, and welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. Great to have you here today.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
You're a well-renowned martial artist. Is that how I describe you?
Yeah, I've been in the martial arts community now for about 36 years, so for a bit.
Yeah. What got you into martial arts?
As a kid, I always wanted to do martial arts,
Yeah.
and I come from pretty modest means. I never had the opportunity as a kid to go to a martial arts academy, and so I got my first job as a teen, and one of the first things I did was go to the local martial arts school and become a member there. And yeah, I started training, and then I took a small detour and joined the Marine Corps for a few years
Hmm.
and came back from the Marine Corps, went to college, continued my martial arts study, and after I graduated from school, just stayed with martial arts and spent my career doing it.
Was it what was the attraction as a child going into martial art? Was it the movies or what was the fascination there?
I used to watch some of the old Bruce Lee movies, which was kind of interesting. As a younger guy, I was really into Western boxing, and that was something that had a real strong pull for me. And that's Western boxing interest is what got me into the meditative arts as well.
Yeah, okay. Nice, nice. So you've been doing it for some time now, and you've got in martial arts, there's a whole array of particular disciplines or practices, I suppose. What particular ones are you most focused on? Because I know you run a school, right, with hundreds of students.
Yeah, so here at the Academy, we have four adult programs. We have our
Hmm.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program, our
Right.
striking program, which is a combination of Muay Thai kickboxing and Western boxing. We have our JKD and Eskrima program, which is kind of based on the Filipino weapons and that kind of thing. And then we have our Tai Chi and Qigong program, which is more of the meditative approach. And that is what the Yielding Warrior is all about, is how to use these applications of meditation in every area of your life.
Yeah. So you've written a few books there, How to Meditate, um, The Big Effect, and the newest book, The Yielding Warrior. Tell us a little bit about The Yielding Warrior. What got you writing this book?
Well, I've been running the academy here for 30 years. When COVID hit,
Hmm.
we had to shut down and we didn't know what was going to happen with the business or how long the shutdown was going to be. And so I was trying to pivot and find other things to do. And so I created the online Yielding Warrior membership, which is connected to the book. And at the same time, in that first 8 weeks of the shutdown, I wrote the book, The Yielding Warrior. And so that's what kind of got me started on the Yielding Warrior path with that.
So did you write both books in the COVID period?
No, over that time, I just wrote the Yielding Warrior. Yeah.
The Yielding Warrior. So that got developed from an online um, course, was it, or online practice?
Well, it's based on the concept of yielding, and yielding to me is one of the coolest concepts in all of martial arts. And the idea
Okay.
of yielding is there's three different directions with yielding. There's physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding.
What is
And
yielding? Like, how do you define the word yielding?
so there's of those three directions, and physical yielding is like kind
Hmm.
of the idea of I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage would push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And so now I can respond with less effort. And this has been used in martial arts for generations because that's what allows smaller people to defeat bigger people, right? And so if you're walking down the street and you come up against some guy who's 250 pounds, you're not going to wrestle that guy to the ground and be very successful. Whereas if you know how to yield and you know how to move, you could yield to his force and maybe get around on his back and choke him out and survive that encounter. And so that's an idea of what physical yielding is all about.
Right.
Now, in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be very well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed, the breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present.
Hmm.
Now, here's where it becomes pretty interesting, because once you start to see those things inside yourself, you also start to see them more in other people. So, say for example, and now we're moving into what we call mental yielding. Say, for example, I say something to you that unsettles you, and I pick up on it when it's like this. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place than if I'm not paying attention to that. And pretty soon I'm so
Right.
far off track, you want to knock me upside the head. And so,
Mm.
learning how to use yielding in all of your interactions is a very powerful concept. And in fact, even that one reason right there is almost enough to pick up a meditative practice just to develop that skill. And that would be one application. And then there's also
So it's
emotional,
physical,
physical,
mental
mental.
yielding. Yep.
Yeah. And then we have emotional yielding, which is very much like mental yielding, but it's with your own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about,
Mm.
oftentimes things will happen
Got a
to
lot
us.
of
Something
those.
will happen. What's that?
I said I got a lot of those.
Yeah, so when something happens to us, oftentimes we respond and we go down this path, and we might get an hour a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But with yielding, if we could have taken a step back and noticed it when it was like this, it's a lot easier to say, maybe this is a better approach. And a lot of times it can save us a lot of heartache on the other side. And the funny thing is, when I start to explain yielding to people, a lot of people resonate with it and say, "Oh, yeah, I understand. I do that all the time." And I agree. Everybody does that to some degree all the time.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, they would see things about that scene and that timeline and the events that happen that we would have no clue of. And that's kind of what the meditative arts helps us do with our
Mm.
own internal awareness and our awareness of what's going on outside as well.
Okay. When you talk about meditative arts, is that aligned with martial arts, or is it a
It's a s-
subcategory of that?
it's a small direction of that. When I say meditative arts, I'm talking about things like sitting meditation, standing meditation, walking meditation, breath work, Tai Chi, Qigong, Yi Chuan, yoga. These are all things that I would include in that meditative art bucket.
Okay. So to get into this idea of yielding physically, mentally, emotionally, we need to develop in our life a meditative art or practice. Is
Yes.
that's the best idea for that? How long have you been doing this for? I assume you've been doing it for some time.
Yeah, I've been studying the meditative arts now for about 30 years.
Yeah, wow. And when you say, sitting, standing, walking, Tai Chi, yoga, I mean, there's a lot that we can do, mindfulness. How do we pick one that is right for us, or do we just sort of start and develop it and practice multiple meditative arts?
Yeah, that's a great question, because one of the most common things I've had with students coming to the academy or coming to train with me is
Hmm.
you'll hear them say, I tried this approach or that approach and it just didn't work for me. And there's you could go onto YouTube and see 1,000 videos on different kinds of meditation, and it really is hard to know where to start. And
Hmm.
so, what's important is, if we take a step back before we actually pick a method and understand the fundamentals of what meditation is. And so, within meditation, we have what we call ritual practices, where you set time aside and you just focus on whatever that practice is. We have active practices, which are things that we can do when we're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store. And then there's philosophical practices that we can use to train the mind and train our focus. And so, when we're building a meditative practice, we want to take things from ritual, active, and philosophical methods and build a practice around our lifestyle that helps us accomplish whatever we're trying to do with the meditation.
Okay. Yeah, a lot to take on there, huh? Um, when you have new students coming into, um, do they come in to do martial arts and then you incorporate meditative arts into their life, or do they actually come in for meditation?
Yes, so there's 4 different programs here, and the ones
Yeah.
that come in for the meditative arts, they're coming in just for
Hmm.
meditation, yes.
Okay. And what are you finding? Obviously, someone's made a decision to contact you and come in for a session, but what are the biggest obstacles for someone starting a meditative practice?
As a teacher, the hardest thing to get somebody to experience the benefits of a meditative practice is getting them to be consistent. And
Mm,
it's one of those things where you need to make it a part of your life and live the practice. It's, a kind of a funny story. When I first started getting into the meditative arts, I had no desire to do meditation. I was really into Western boxing. I used to go to this club down the street from here called Grand Avenue Boxing, and there was a coach there who was a very well-known coach and had created national and world champion level boxers, and I really wanted to get to spend some time with him.
yeah.
Well, so I'd always show it up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there and kind of followed him around for a while. And after about 3 or 4 months of asking him questions here and there and letting him know that I had an interest, he started spending some time with me and showing me a few things. Well, it only took 2 or 3 weeks, and he said to me, and these I'll never forget these words. He said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. And I was just this dumb young kid. I didn't know much about anything. And here I'm thinking, meditation, how's that going to help me be a better boxer? And I had a lot of respect for him though. And I took on the practice and it changed my whole life in so many
Mm,
ways that now it's kind of my main focus. And the thing with the practice is, and I think everybody that picks up meditation kind of comes to this hurdle, is that he was telling me when I first started training with him and doing the meditative arts that he wanted me doing an hour a day. And so everything he gave me, I treated like gold, and I wanted to really show him that I wanted to be a good student. So when he told me to do an hour a day, I was doing an hour and a half a day. And in the first couple weeks, he showed me the first few movements of a Tai Chi form. And you could probably learn these movements in 2 or 3 lessons. And I was doing them for an hour and a half every single day. And
yeah.
at about 3 or 4 months or so, I started getting a little discouraged, thinking, "Man, what am I doing here? Why isn't this guy showing me anything? I'm doing these same 3 movements over and over again." And I'm sure he could see the
Wow.
frustration on my
For
face
how
because I'd
long? For
still
3 months or so?
for about 3 or 4 months, yeah. And
Yeah.
remember, I'm doing an hour and a half every day,
Of the
and
same moves.
the same moves over and over again.
It's good
And
discipline.
so as I go to the gym, the last thing I wanted to do was to get to a point where he'd ask me, "Hey, did you do your practice today?" and have to tell him no. So I did it every day. And a funny thing happened around maybe 6 or 7 month mark that I went down in my basement to practice my Tai Chi. And I looked up at the clock and an hour and a half had already gone by and it felt like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's really pretty cool. And so I was really inspired at that point, and I really started kind of developing a passion and a desire to get deeper into the practice. And from that point on, I was hooked. And I'm sure that he kind of saw that transformation in me. And shortly after that, he showed me the rest of the form in just a couple weeks, which normally takes people about a year to learn. And
Mm.
so it's that discipline in the beginning of getting through that uncertainty to really see what all the benefits of the meditative arts have to offer, which is the biggest hurdle for new practitioners.
Yeah. So I guess consistency. Number one, you talk about discipline there. And I mean, just listening to that, 3 moves for 3 or 4 months, hour and a half a day. I mean, that's good discipline. You've obviously potentially a man of good discipline anyway. And I think discipline can come if you're, very passionate about any practice in life, right? Um, but harder for people that maybe are uncertain about that particular practice. And meditation, you sort of explained it then. It's hard to see the results straight away. And even after a long period of time, it's hard to see the results. I do a kind of mindfulness meditation, up and down over the last decade, I suppose, and trying to be more consistent. But certainly over a longer period of time, I've noticed the benefits more so. But I don't dedicate an hour and a half a day to it.
Yeah.
You know, if you say that to someone, they're just like, well, how do you fit in an hour and a half a day? You know, that'd scare you off, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And you know, that's why like when people come into the academy, I usually have them start with doing a 20-minute ritual a day. And I
Okay.
feel like if you could be consistent with a 20-minute ritual a day and then integrate some of these active practices that don't take any time at all, you can do them during other activities. You can really see a lot of benefits from that, you know, and everybody has 20 minutes a day to kind of look internally and take a little bit of a check on how they're feeling, and that's what meditation's all about. You know, one of the things that I hear people say over and over again is that, you know, I tried meditation, I couldn't do it because I don't know how to quiet my mind. And meditation's not about quieting your mind. It's more about having the strength and the ability to take those distractions and come back to that center. If you meditate for 20 minutes or an hour or whatever it is, you don't need to be silent in your mind for an hour. You need to get good at recognizing the distractions and bringing yourself back to center. And the
Hmm.
more that you exercise that muscle, the deeper you're going to get into your practices, and that's kind of what it's all about. And it takes consistency in order to be able to do that. And within the practice, and this is where it's pretty interesting as well, because this applies to any area in life, is that by doing this on a consistent basis, not only do you develop that muscle and get stronger at your ability to do that, but your awareness gets heightened and you see things a lot clearer, and it's easier to make an adjustment when it's this small than when it's kind of blown out of proportion. And so having that heightened awareness and that skill you can apply in anything you do.
So that's really, I mean, you sort of started the conversation about that, being able to identify issues, whether it's mental issues, emotional issues, or physical, you know, issues that you might encounter day to day, identifying them early, identifying when they're small, and then being able to deal with that proactively rather than just reacting to life daily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With
Within the meditative, oh, go ahead, sir.
No, you go, you go. I was gathering
So
thoughts.
within the meditative, we got a little bit of a delay here. Within the meditative arts, there's five kind of foundational principles. We have
Hmm.
regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And if you understand these and cultivate these principles into your life, you can do any meditative practice. It doesn't matter what it is. And those foundational principles really help us get deeper into the practice.
So you're talking about regulating body, breath, mind, energy, and spirit.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like with regulating the body, for example, say I'm sitting down at a computer for 4 hours and I'm hunched over and my neck starts getting tight, my energy starts getting depleted. That's natural. Everybody does this, right? To
Hmm.
some degree. If you can just be in a state where somebody that say somebody walks into the room that's the most admired person in your life, is maybe it's a leader or a famous musician or whatever it is. Think about how you're going to perk up and be attentive. And that's the idea, you know, in Tai Chi and Qigong, we think about raising the shin and sinking the chi. And raising the shin is your spirit. And if we can do this with proper alignment, a good foundation, and a relaxed body, we can do this without getting tight and tense. And this gives us that presence and that ability to kind of be in the moment. And that would be kind of when we start talking about regulating the body, what we're striving for. And of all the regulations, regulating the body is the easiest one to do with a little bit of discipline and focus.
Okay. You talk about raising the shin, so shin being spirit, and
Yes.
then lowering the chi. Did you say energy? Is it?
Yes.
Okay, lowering the
So
energy.
no. Well, so what we want to do is, if you think about, a lot of times when people get excited, they get tense and
Hmm.
their bodies get stiff as well. Well, when you can let the body be relaxed, but then still pick up the energy or the shin or the spirit, now you're able to move. And in athletics, for example, this is real important because
Yeah,
a lot of athletes, in order to
yeah,
get that focus, if they get mentally distracted, they get tense, then they don't perform as well. And a lot of professional athletes practice the meditative arts to
yeah.
help them with this idea.
That's interesting. Yeah, because you do, and I play tennis and I'm very socially and not very good at it, but I just know when you're in those moments where you're serving or it's like match point or whatever it might be, you do get that level of intensity in the body and in the mind as well, and that causes you to be less effective at that pinnacle moment.
Exactly.
So when we're starting, because there's a lot of people that are probably listening to this may have a meditation practice already that they do, and may be curious as to what you would prescribe to someone. But there would be a lot of people out there too that maybe don't have a regular practice. How do we incorporate, to start off with at a base level, this meditative arts in our life, as far as something that we can do daily, ritually, something we can do actively, and then um, and you said something else there too, didn't you? So what could
Philosophically,
we,
yeah.
philosophically, sorry, what could we do in that to incorporate that into our lives, do you think? What would be three recommendations?
One would be to find a ritual practice that you resonate with.
Hmm.
Sometimes for some people, it might be a sitting practice. For other people, it might be a movement practice like Tai Chi or Qigong, or maybe a walking meditation,
Oh, so that's
or
that's not active. Would Tai Chi
no,
and walking be an active meditation?
they are active with the body, but they can be a ritual practice. So
Okay,
when I say ritual practice, there's a lot of different still and movement meditations that you can
right.
do.
Okay.
And so I would find a ritual practice that resonates with you. And so in the the Yielding Warrior Way, we teach people things from sitting practices, standing meditations, movement meditations, um, more philosophical and mental meditations that they can do, to incorporate and find a ritual practice that's going to resonate with them.
Yeah.
And then for the active practices, these are really easy to integrate, and they could be things like breathing exercises or small energetic circulations in the body, or different mental visualizations that you're going through. And they can be done in as little as 2 or 3 minutes. And the
That's just
idea,
saying you can do through the day.
yeah, you do those through the day. And usually what I recommend to people to try to get into the habit is maybe set an alarm on your phone to go off every 60 or
Hmm.
90 minutes. And then just, even if it's as simple as just counting out 10 breaths with good posture, that's kind of a way to reconnect and try to get back into that overall awareness. And so those would be a couple things to start with that.
Okay, when would you, so let's say we're starting ritual practice, would we look at doing 20 minutes to begin with? And would we do that, when we start the day or at the end of the day, or when is the best?
I feel like doing it in the beginning of the day is very valuable, because it gets you off to a good start of the day. And then no matter how
Hmm.
busy or stressed you get to throughout your day, that you always at least had that good start.
Yeah,
Um,
makes sense.
However, anytime, even if you do it in the afternoon or the evening, is better than not doing it at all. The one of the most common excuses I hear people say is, "Oh, I'm too busy. I don't have time to meditate." And the Dalai Lama once said that everybody should meditate for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour. And I love that,
That's a good
because
one. Yeah.
everybody should have at least 20 minutes a day to kind of visit and connect with, who they are.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess you probably find that quite commonly with a lot of people, particularly nowadays, attention deficit, society, and there seems to be a lot of overwhelm and stress, and like we have too much on our plates. But there's certainly still time in the day that we could, not do something else to give ourselves that time back. But you must encounter that a lot with people just, to try and meditate for 20 minutes when you're so used to being distracted by everything that's going on is quite tricky.
It can be, and so I feel like for some people that have a little bit of that attention deficit disorder, sometimes movement meditative practices are a better way to integrate them into the idea of
Yeah,
meditation.
true. Yeah. So something like Tai Chi or
Yeah,
Qigong.
yes.
Yep. Okay. And so your Yielding Warrior, is that something online that people can jump into and learn and develop their practice with?
Yeah, so right now I have a free book offer. If anybody's interested, it's the yieldingwarrior.com/book. And you can
Yeah.
go there and get a free copy of the book. You just pay shipping and handling. It'll get sent out to you. And you'll also have the opportunity to check out the online membership for a couple weeks and see if it's something that would resonate with you.
So with the book, reading the book, I mean, you teach a lot of practices and I guess the philosophies behind the meditative arts in that book.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. So what's that link again? I'll put it in
It's
the show notes.
the yieldingwarrior.com
Yeah.
/book.
Yieldingwarrior.com /book.
Yes.
So check it out, guys, and I'll stick that link in the show notes. You can get a copy of the book and have a couple of weeks of membership
Yeah, you could check it
and
out. And
trial.
and when you're in there checking out the trial, there's different directions. You can look at some of the sitting practices, some of the movement practices, the standing meditation. There's
Mhm.
a lot of different things to explore.
How often would you meditate at the moment in your day-to-day life? Like, what would
I,
your day look like generally?
I have a morning ritual that I do every single day. I haven't
Yeah.
missed a day in years. And then I do throughout the day whenever I get a moment here and there.
So what does a morning ritual look like for someone that's been practicing this for many, many, many years?
It's a combination of doing some breath work, some sitting meditation, some stretching exercises, and Tai Chi.
Okay. And how long would you do that for every morning?
About an hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Wow. Okay. It keeps you nice and centered. You look pretty composed and calm, generally, talking with you here for those who are watching on YouTube. Yeah. Hour and a half. Okay, there you go. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for coming on the show today. Really appreciate you sharing. Very important practice, I believe. Personally, I'd like to do more of it. And I'm focusing on that in my life. So I appreciate you sharing and giving me some inspiration and certainly the audience some inspiration as well. For everyone listening out there, best place to reach you, Jeff, is it through the yieldingwarrior.com?
Yes.
Yep. So you go there, guys, theyieldingwarrior.com. Again, yieldingwarrior.com /book if you'd like to get a copy of that book as well, shipped to your address. And Jeff, any final words?
Thank you very much. It was an honor to meet you, and I hope to chat with you again someday soon.
That'd be great, mate. Thank you, guys. Check it out at thehiddenlight.com. Until next time, peace, passion, and purpose. See you soon.